I'm 34 years old, and 4 months ago, my own parents filed a petition in Dallas County Probate Court asking a judge to declare me mentally unfit to manage my life, my finances, and everything I owned. Picture the courtroom. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. My father, Anders Lind, seated beside an expensive estate attorney, posture rigid, jaw locked. The same stance he'd held at the head of our dinner table for as long as I can remember. My mother, Eva, dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, performing quiet devastation as if she'd rehearsed it for years. Their lawyer barely hiding his confidence across the aisle, like the outcome was already decided. They weren't asking for help. They were asking for control. My bank accounts, my car, my apartment. They described me as immature, isolated, incapable of managing my own affairs. What they didn't know was what I actually had. And there was one thing, just one, that Anders Lind, the man who had controlled every room he'd ever entered for 3 decades, never bothered to check. Public records. The same public records processed every day at the Dallas County Clerk's office, where his daughter worked. But only if you genuinely want to. Now, let me take you back 4 months. It was a Tuesday evening in November. I remember because Tuesdays were my slow cooker nights. I'd come home to my studio in Oak Lawn, lift the lid, eat something warm at my small kitchen table, read for an hour, and go to bed. That was my life. Predictable. Quiet. Mine. My apartment was a 450-square-foot walk-up, second floor, middle-class neighborhood where no one asked questions and no one offered help. The faucet dripped unless you turned it just right. The radiator knocked at 2 a.m. The rent was $1,350 a month, and in 7 years, I had never missed a payment. I sorted through my mail at the counter. Electric bill, grocery flyer, and then a white envelope, heavier than the others, stamped with the return address, Dallas County Probate Court, number 2. I opened it standing up. Petition for appointment of guardian. Petitioners, Anders Lind and Eva Lind. Respondent, Helena Marie Lind. Grounds. Respondent lacks capacity for self-care and financial management. My hands started shaking. Not because I feared the court. I had worked inside one my entire adult life. I knew what guardianship petitions look like. I had filed hundreds into archive boxes over the years. What made my hands tremble was something else. The realization that my parents had sat across from a lawyer and said the words out loud. Our daughter cannot take care of herself. Give us control. I set the document down on the Formica counter beside the small black notebook I kept in my kitchen drawer. 11 years of investment records written in my own handwriting. Dates, contributions, quarterly totals. My father used to say his daughter didn't know how to do anything except sort paper. He was right about the paper. He was just wrong about everything else. The money they assumed I had, and the money I actually had, were separated by a distance Anders Lind could never have imagined. To understand what happened in that courtroom, you have to understand my father. Anders was the kind of man who sat at the head of every table, literally. Thanksgiving, Christmas, a random Wednesday dinner, it didn't matter. Back straight, voice filling the room so completely there was no space left for anyone else. If my mother began a sentence, he would finish it. If I offered an opinion, he would flick his hand like brushing away a fly. What do girls know about that? For over 20 years, he ran Lindholm Construction Group, a mid-sized contracting company with 15 crew members and commercial projects across North Texas. He wore his success like armor. Loud, polished, unquestionable. A silver Lexus SUV gleamed in our Plano driveway. A Rolex on his wrist, Not quite what it appeared to be. A 4-bedroom house that looked solid from the outside. But appearances are surface-level things, and Anders never let anyone close enough to inspect the details. My mother, Eva, fought differently. She didn't command. She wept. She sighed. She called at 7 in the morning with, "I just worry about you, sweetheart," in a tone that made you feel guilty for existing independently. If you said no, she called every aunt, cousin, and church friend within 50 miles and told them you were troubled, ungrateful, cold. Together, they were a system. Anders directed, Eva enforced through guilt, and anyone who resisted became the problem. What I didn't know, what almost no one knew outside a bankruptcy court, was that Lindholm Construction Group had filed Chapter 7 6 months before that envelope arrived. The Lexus was 3 payments behind. The house had a foreclosure notice taped inside a kitchen cabinet. Anders Lind wasn't acting out of concern. He was drowning, and he needed something, someone he could legally control. People always ask, why didn't you just cut them off years ago? That's a fair question, and the answer has 3 parts. The first was money. When I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in information science and a job at the Dallas County Clerk's Office making $31,000 a year, I carried $47,000 in student loans. My father had co-signed them, and he reminded me of that the way some people mention the weather. Casually, frequently, with just enough warning in his tone. If you walk away from this family, Helena, I call the bank. You understand me? I co-signed. 1 phone call. He couldn't actually do that. That's not how co-signed loans work. But I was 22, and I didn't know that yet. I paid off every single dollar by the time I was 31. I remember clicking Confirm Final Payment while sitting in my 2017 Toyota Corolla in a grocery store parking lot. I sat there afterward and cried for 20 minutes. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time in 9 years, Anders Lind had nothing of mine in his hands. He just didn't know it yet. The second reason was my brother, Noah. 13 years younger than me, quiet, brilliant, the kind of kid who would read entire Wikipedia articles for fun and never tell anyone. He still lived under my father's roof. If I had cut contact back then, Anders would have punished him for it. He would have drained Noah's college fund, threatened to throw him out, used him as leverage, or worse, hurt him just to remind me that he could. I couldn't risk that. Noah turned 21 last year. He's in his second year at the University of Texas at Austin on a merit scholarship he earned on his own. He's not a hostage anymore. The third reason was a piece of paper. When I was 24, I signed a limited power of attorney giving my father authority to handle a minor insurance claim on my car. It seemed harmless, temporary. I didn't read the fine print carefully enough. I trusted him because he was my father, and at 24, that word still meant something to me. Anders kept the original document. 3 years later, I formally revoked it. Notarized, filed, documented. But when he submitted his guardianship petition to the court, he attached the original power of attorney as if it were still valid, as if I had voluntarily handed him control once before and might need to do so again. He never mentioned the revocation. He concealed it. He misrepresented it to the court. I didn't know that part yet, not until discovery. When you work in archives, you learn something most people don't understand. The moment you open a file matters just as much as what's inside it. I didn't sever ties immediately. I waited. I prepared. And when all 3 chains broke, the student loans paid off, Noah financially independent, the power of attorney legally revoked, Anders lost every piece of leverage he had over me. So he escalated. to a courtroom. And that was his mistake. Because you can ignore a phone call, you can block a number, but once something is filed in court, it exists in a way you can't walk away from. He forced me into a fight I couldn't avoid, so I prepared for the only fight I would ever need. Here's what nobody tells you about working in public records. You spend your days surrounded by the financial anatomy of an entire county. Property deeds, tax lien certificates, foreclosure filings, trust transfers, probate records. Thousands of them, year after year, passing through your hands. Most people processed the documents and moved on. I processed them, and I paid attention. At 23, I started reading about index fund investing. Nothing flashy, nothing speculative. The Bogle approach. Buy the total market, keep expenses low, don't touch it. Let time do the work. I opened a Vanguard Total Market Index Fund account with my first $400 and set up automatic contributions every month without fail. I lived on less than $1,200 a month. Studio apartment, rice and beans, library books, a used Toyota Corolla I bought for cash. Everything else went into investments. By 25, I started noticing something at work. Tax lien properties. Homes auctioned because owners owed back taxes, sometimes just a few $1,000s. One afternoon during lunch, I saw a 2-bedroom house in Irving listed for $23,000 at a tax auction. Assessed value over $110,000. I did the math on a napkin, then I bought it. I spent weekends patching drywall, repainting walls, replacing fixtures with YouTube tutorials and a borrowed toolbox. 6 months later, I rented it out for $1,500 a month. The tenants kept it cleaner than I ever had. Then I bought another. Then a third. My colleague, Susan Caldwell, was 63 years old, a retired CPA who claimed retirement was boring and wildly overrated. She worked part-time at the Dallas County Clerk's office because, in her words, someone has to keep these people honest. Somewhere along the way, she became more than a coworker. She became a mentor. And, if I'm honest, something close to a guardian angel. Susan taught me to read financial statements the way a surgeon studies an MRI, slowly, precisely, looking for what most people miss. She reviewed my tax filings every year. She notarized my documents without ever asking unnecessary questions, and she never once suggested I was crazy for living in a modest studio while quietly owning 3 rental properties across the Metroplex. No one at work knew. I didn't drive a luxury car. I didn't wear designer labels. My desk held a chipped files and coffee mug and a county-issued monitor displaying a records management dashboard. If you glanced at my screen, you'd see nothing but ordinary paperwork. You wouldn't see the Vanguard account I checked at night, the one that had been compounding steadily for over a decade. Susan was the only person who knew I owned more than what my apartment suggested. But even she didn't know the full number. Not until the court ordered me to disclose it. When I refused to sign the voluntary guardianship papers, Anders changed tactics. I'll give my father this much. When he wanted something, he didn't hesitate. Within a week, he launched a campaign, not against a competitor, not against a rival contractor, against his own daughter. He moved with the efficiency of a man who had spent 30 years managing job sites and barking orders. Phone calls started. My Aunt Carol, his older sister who had deferred to him her entire life, called one Thursday evening. Her voice softened into that careful, clinical tone people use when they think someone might be unstable. "Sweetheart, your dad says you've been struggling. You know you can talk to me, right?" My cousin texted me. "Heard things are rough. Let me know if you need anything." He had never texted me before. Eva was more strategic. She didn't name me directly. She didn't have to. She posted on Facebook, "When your child refuses help, all a mother can do is pray. Some battles you can't fight alone." Every single one praising her devotion. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed nonstop. 14 missed calls in one day. Some familiar, some not. Anders wasn't just talking. He was building a narrative. Helena is unstable. Helena is isolated. Helena needs intervention. He was laying groundwork for witnesses. Late at night, his texts started. "You think you're smarter than your father? A woman with no husband, no family, living in a box. You'll regret this, Helena." I didn't delete them. I screenshotted every message, timestamped them, saved them to a flash drive labeled AL, and locked it in my desk drawer at work. Then something else happened. Something quieter. Aunt Carol called again. This time, her concern sounded rehearsed. "Your father mentioned you might be dealing with depression. Serious depression. He just wants to make sure you're getting help." That's when I realized Anders wasn't just calling relatives. He was scripting them. And then the court did something he didn't expect. As part of the standard Texas guardianship process, the judge ordered both parties to submit a full financial disclosure, a complete inventory of assets, liabilities, income, and expenses. Routine, procedural, the kind of paperwork most people dread. For me, it was an invitation. I sat at my kitchen table in Oak Lawn and read the order twice. Then, for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not a sarcastic smile, not a defensive one, a real one. They wanted the court to examine my finances? Fine. Let the court examine my finances. I pulled the black moleskin notebook from my drawer, its spine cracked from 11 years of use. Every page filled in careful handwriting. Dates, purchase prices, account balances, rental income, quarterly Vanguard totals. At 8:30 that night, I called Susan. She answered on the second ring. She always did. 30 years in accounting had trained her never to let a phone ring 4 times. "Susan, I need your help," I said. "I need to turn everything into a formal court disclosure. All of it." There was a pause. "All of it?" she repeated. "Everything." Another pause. "This is going to be one hell of a document." I know. I had never totaled it all in one place before. 11 years of disciplined investing, compound growth, reinvested dividends, 3 rental properties with equity and steady income, savings, my 2017 Toyota Corolla, my lease. 3 days later, we sat at Susan's kitchen table staring at the bottom line of the spreadsheet. She removed her reading glasses slowly and set them down. "Your father has absolutely no idea, does he?" "No," I said quietly. "He doesn't." And truthfully, I felt a little stunned myself. I had been so focused on the system, save, invest, maintain, repeat, that I had never stepped back to see the full scale of it. Wealth grows quietly, like roots pushing through concrete in the dark, unseen, unnoticed, until one day it shifts the ground beneath your feet. While I was compiling the truth, Anders was constructing something else. A lie. Through the discovery process, where both sides exchange evidence before a hearing, I received copies of what his attorney had submitted to the court on my parents' behalf. His name was Daniel Keating, 50 years old, impeccably dressed, specializing in guardianship and probate litigation. He had built a reputation in Dallas County for winning 12 consecutive guardianship cases, most involving elderly clients whose families wanted control of their estates. Tailored suits, a Mont Blanc pen, the calm assurance of a man who had never been caught off guard in a courtroom. He billed $400 an hour. And Anders was paying him with borrowed money he didn't have, gambling that once he gained control of my assets, he'd recover every dollar tenfold. The packet Keating submitted contained 3 pieces of evidence. First, a sworn affidavit signed by Anders and Eva claiming I lived in isolation, refused social contact, and demonstrated an inability to manage basic adult responsibilities. It was fiction dressed in legal terminology, notarized, polished, delivered without hesitation. Second, letters from my Aunt Carol and a former neighbor, Michael Turner. Carol's letter was emotional and vague. Michael's was almost embarrassing. He'd lived 3 houses down from my parents and hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. Anders had clearly coached them both. Then there was the third document, the one that made my chest tighten. A psychological evaluation authored by Dr. Leonard Bishop. According to the report, I exhibited social withdrawal, executive dysfunction, and impaired financial judgment. I read it twice. Then I checked the header. Doctor. Bishop had never met me, never examined me, never spoken to me. The entire evaluation was based on descriptions provided by my parents, a psychological assessment of a woman the doctor had never laid eyes on. I set the paper down and picked up my phone. "Claire," I said when my attorney answered, "the psych report. He never evaluated me." "I know," she replied evenly. "That's not just unethical. It may qualify as fraud upon the court, and that's exactly how we're going to treat it." I should explain how I found Claire Whitmore. 2 days after receiving the court summons, I went to the downtown Dallas Public Library. Not home, not work. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere no one could see my search history. I looked for attorneys who specialized in fighting abusive guardianships. There weren't many. It's a narrow field. The kind of law most people never think about, until they desperately need it. Claire's name appeared in a local article about guardianship reform in Texas. She had represented 3 adult clients whose families attempted to seize control of their finances. She won all 3. Her office was a converted storefront tucked onto a quiet street downtown, easy to miss unless you were looking for it. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, a framed JD from the University of Texas School of Law, a mug of tea that had clearly gone cold hours earlier. She was 42, direct, composed, the kind of calm that told you she'd seen worse stories than mine. "Tell me what they want," she said. "Everything," I answered. "My bank accounts, my car, my apartment." "And what do you actually have?" I placed a folder on her desk, not the court's folder, mine, the one Susan and I had prepared. Claire opened it and flipped through the pages slowly. I watched her eyes move line by line. For 30 seconds, she said nothing. Then she looked up. "Your parents have no idea about any of this, do they?" "My father has never once asked how much I earn," I said. "He assumes he already knows." Claire leaned back in her chair. "Here's what we're going to do. First, I'll petition the court to appoint an independent investigator, someone who will actually meet you instead of drafting a report from your father's script. Second, we comply fully with the financial disclosure order. Third," she paused, "we don't reveal a single card until the hearing." She studied me for a moment. "One more thing. Pull your credit report tonight. All 3 bureaus. Don't wait." "Why?" "In my experience," she said carefully, "when a parent files for guardianship over a financially independent adult child, it's rarely the first boundary they've crossed." I didn't understand what she meant. Not yet. Meanwhile, Anders wasn't limiting his efforts to the courtroom. He was shaping the narrative in public. At First United Methodist Church of Plano, he told the men's prayer group that his eldest child was struggling mentally. He avoided the word guardianship. Instead, he used Intervention. It sounded gentler, nobler, like an act of love. He said he and Eva were stepping in before it was too late. 3 men offered to pray with him. One shook his hand and said, "You're doing the right thing, Anders." Eva extended the story further. She called my father's former business associates, some of whom didn't yet know about Lindholm Construction Group's bankruptcy, and casually mentioned a family health situation. She contacted neighbors. She reached out to acquaintances. She even managed to contact the wife of the real estate agent who handled my building's management company. She cast the net wide, and the consequences reached me on a Thursday morning. I was at my desk processing a batch of property transfers when my supervisor approached quietly and asked if we could step into the conference room for a moment. Her tone was kind. My supervisor closed the conference room door gently before she spoke. "I received a call," she said. She didn't say from whom. "Someone asked about your mental health status and whether it's affecting your performance." She paused, then added carefully, "I'm required to ask, is there anything going on that HR should be aware of?" I met her eyes. "My parents have filed a guardianship petition. I'm contesting it. It has no merit. My work has not been affected, and it won't be." She nodded, wrote something down, let me return to my desk. But the air had shifted. 2 colleagues looked at me differently in the hallway. Someone had seen Eva's Facebook post. The narrative was spreading exactly the way Anders intended. Then came the landlord. Anders had contacted my building's management office, expressing concern about his daughter's ability to maintain stable housing. My landlord, a decent man who had never once received a complaint about me, called to check in. He didn't threaten non-renewal. He didn't have to. "I just wanted to make sure everything's all right," he said. Anders was dismantling my life from the outside in. Employer, housing, reputation, brick by brick. And he believed he was doing it to someone with no resources, no allies, no options. That night, I followed Claire's advice. I pulled my credit reports from all 3 bureaus. I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet, my laptop open, a glass of water beside me I never touched. The first page loaded. Everything looked normal. My credit cards, auto insurance, rental history, clean, organized, mine. Then I scrolled. 2 credit card accounts I had never opened. 1 Visa, 1 MasterCard. Opened 14 and 11 months earlier. Combined balance, $42,700. Billing addresses I didn't recognize, except one matched a P.O. box Anders had used for Lindholm Construction Group. I kept scrolling. A home equity line of credit, $140,000. Drawn against my second rental property in Garland, opened 9 months prior. The application bore my name, my social security number, and a signature that was not mine. I sat very still. My parents hadn't filed for guardianship to gain control of my finances. They had already been inside them, using information from a power of attorney I had revoked 3 years earlier. Anders had retained the original document, presented it as active, and leveraged it to access credit in my name, funneling borrowed money into a company already collapsing in bankruptcy. When I added everything together, credit cards, HELOC, interest, fees, the total exposure came to $389,420. I called Claire at 11:15 p.m. "I found it," I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. 2 fraudulent credit cards, a HELOC with a forged signature, almost $400,000. There was a brief silence on the other end. "This is identity theft," she said quietly. "And this is exactly why they need the guardianship. They're trying to retroactively legalize what they've already done illegally." "What do we do?" We can report it to the police immediately. No! The word left my mouth faster than I expected. Not yet, she paused. Helena, that's a risk. I understand the risk. I also understand my father. I stared at the dark window above my sink. He needs to hear it read aloud, on the record, in a room he can't walk out of. That's the only language he's ever respected. Another pause. All right, Claire said. Then we commission a forensic audit. Independent CPA firm, fully documented, admissible. We attach it as a supplemental exhibit to your asset disclosure. Do it. After I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The faucet dripped. The radiator knocked. And somewhere in Plano, in a 4-bedroom house with a foreclosure notice hidden inside a kitchen cabinet, Anders Lind was sleeping soundly, convinced his strategy was working. 3 weeks before the hearing, the court-appointed investigator arrived. Her name was Patricia Gomez, 55. Gray hair cut short, professionally neutral in a way that made you want to tell the truth because you sensed she had heard every possible lie already. The court had assigned her to determine whether I was incapable of managing my own life. She stood in the doorway of my 450-square-foot studio and took it in. Clean, organized, bed made, dishes washed, bills neatly filed, all current. May I come in? Of course. She stayed for 90 minutes. She asked about my job, my routine, my social life, my finances. The questions were careful, designed to surface confusion, instability, inconsistency. I answered plainly. I told her about my work at the records office, the books I read, the slow cooker meals I made during the week, the Sunday morning walks through the neighborhood. She wrote everything down. Then she asked about my parents. They believe you can't manage your life? Yes. And you disagree? Yes. She looked at me steadily. Why do you think they filed this petition? I met her gaze, and for the first time, I said it out loud. You'd have to ask them that. Patricia met with Anders and Eva the following week. Claire later told me how that meeting had gone. Anders had dominated the conversation, interrupted Eva more than once, leaned forward, voice tight with visible irritation. She's 34, he had said, jabbing a finger against the table. Living in a box. No husband, no children, no future. That's normal to you? Ava, of course, cried. She always did. Patricia's report would be filed before the hearing. I didn't know what she wrote, but when she left my apartment, she paused at the door, glanced at my bookshelf, 3 rows deep, half finance, half literature, and then looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Thank you, Helena, she said softly. I have what I need. And she gave the faintest smile. 3 days before the hearing, at 11:47 p.m., my phone lit up on the nightstand. Dad. I almost let it ring out, but something in me, the part that had been waiting 11 years for this moment, answered. Helena. His voice was low, controlled, the tone he used when he wanted authority without volume. You need to withdraw your objection. Sign the voluntary guardianship. Your mother is sick over this. I'm carrying debt you can't imagine. You're our daughter. You have obligations. I've already said no, I replied. I'll say it again in court. There was a crack in his composure. You think you can challenge me in front of a judge? You think anyone is going to side with you? You're a woman who sorts paper in a government office, Helena. That's all you've ever been. I let the silence stretch. 2 seconds. 3. You'll see what a woman who sorts paper can do. Good night, Dad. I ended the call. On my kitchen table, the completed disclosure file waited. 40 pages, tabbed in yellow. every number verified, every document notarized. Claire had confirmed the forensic audit was finished. The independent CPA firm had traced every unauthorized transaction, documented the forged HELOC signature, identified the fraudulent credit card applications, connected them directly to Anders and Eva Lind. Everything was ready. The hearing was Tuesday morning. 72 hours. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while a streetlight cast a pale rectangle across the plaster. I wasn't afraid. Not the way I'd been at 22, staring at a co-signed loan like a chain around my ankle. This was different. This was the stillness before something irreversible. 3 days. 3 days, and it would end. One way or another. If you've ever lain awake at night, knowing the people who were supposed to protect you are the ones threatening to dismantle your life, then you understand this part. Now let me take you to Tuesday. Tuesday, 8:45 a.m., Dallas County Probate Court, number 2. I arrived early. I have never been late to anything in my life, and I wasn't about to begin with the hearing that would determine whether I retained control of my own existence. I wore a light blue button-down shirt, dark slacks, flat shoes. No jewelry except a plain wristwatch. Minimal makeup. I looked exactly like what I was. A county employee on her day off. Nothing flashy, nothing defensive. The courtroom was smaller than people imagine. Wood-paneled walls, fluorescent lights humming faintly overhead, 2 tables facing the bench, a gallery with about 20 seats, mostly empty. Anders and Eva were already seated at the left table. My father wore a charcoal gray suit I'd never seen before. New, or borrowed, or purchased on a credit line he couldn't afford. His back was perfectly straight. Eva sat beside him in navy, clutching a handkerchief like a stage prop. Between them sat Daniel Keating, laptop open, Mont Blanc pen uncapped, silver cufflinks catching the light. He looked like a man who had already drafted his closing argument. Behind them, Aunt Carol sat in the front row, hands folded. Michael Turner shifted uncomfortably beside her. I walked to the right side table and sat next to Claire Whitmore. Claire wore a dark blazer, no accessories. Her briefcase closed. She didn't glance across the aisle. She didn't need to. On our table rested a clear plastic folder, 40 pages, yellow tabs. I looked up briefly. Anders' fingers were tapping the table, slow, rhythmic, a habit from my childhood. He always did that when he felt certain, when he believed the outcome was already decided. I had watched those fingers tap for 34 years. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Raymond Castillo took the bench. 57. Silver-haired. Known for 2 things, fairness and 0 tolerance for wasted time. In the matter of Lind versus Lind, the clerk announced, petition for appointment of guardian. It had begun. Daniel Keating stood first. He buttoned his jacket with practiced ease and approached the podium. Your Honor, he began, voice measured and composed. We are here today out of genuine concern for the well-being of Helena Lind, age 34. Mrs. Lind lives alone in a studio apartment, maintains minimal social engagement, earns a modest income as a records analyst, and over a sustained period has demonstrated an inability to establish or maintain the type of personal and professional stability that reflects sound judgment and self-sufficiency. He paused deliberately. Her parents, Anders and Eva Lind, are not here as adversaries, he said smoothly. They are here as parents, concerned parents. They have watched their daughter withdraw from family, from community, from opportunity. They sincerely believe that guardianship is the most compassionate intervention available. Compassion. That was the word he chose. He introduced the affidavits. Anders' statement was clinical, measured. a portrait of stoic fatherly worry. Eva's was emotional and trembling, filled with phrases like, "I fear for her safety," and "a mother's helplessness." Then came the letters from Aunt Carol and Michael Turner. "We're just worried about her. She keeps to herself. It's not normal." Keating held up Dr. Leonard Bishop's report with both hands so the judge could see the official header. "A licensed psychological evaluation, Your Honor, concluding that Ms. Lind exhibits markers consistent with impaired executive function and diminished capacity for independent financial management." Eva dabbed her eyes on cue. Anders sat rigid, his expression carefully arranged into something resembling pain, but to anyone who truly knew him, it was control. Keating returned to his seat, uncapped his Mont Blanc pen, and scribbled a note. He glanced across the aisle at me, dismissive. The look said everything. She's a county employee. She has nothing. I sat through every word. Incapable, isolated, unable to manage. Eva's performance with the handkerchief, Carol's rehearsed concern, Michael Turner's vague testimony about how I didn't come outside much 6 years ago, when I was 28 and spending weekends renovating a house he had no idea I owned. I listened as my life was framed as failure. A studio apartment, an older car, a government job, a woman alone. Under the table, my hands were clenched. Not in anger, in restraint. 11 years of restraint compressed into a single morning. Claire's hand brushed lightly against my forearm. "Not yet," she murmured without turning her head. "Almost." I looked at my father. He wasn't watching Keating. He wasn't watching the judge. He was watching me. And in his eyes, I saw what I had seen my entire life. Certainty. Not certainty that he was right. He never questioned that. Certainty that the world was arranged the way he believed it was. That daughters remained small. That authority prevailed. That the loudest voice owned the room. He didn't blink. Neither did I. I lowered my gaze for 3 seconds. Inhale. Exhale. Then I straightened my back, placed both palms flat against the table, and faced forward. My father taught me something he never meant to teach. When you grow up underestimated, you prepare for everything, because you know no one will hand you a second chance. The folder sat between Claire and me. Yellow tabs, 40 pages, every number verified. Anders had brought a narrative. I had brought documentation. Judge Raymond Castillo turned toward our table. "Ms. Whitmore, does the respondent wish to present a response?" Claire stood and buttoned her blazer. "Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to begin with the report from the court-appointed investigator." She didn't rush. She didn't dramatize. She simply asked the court to read the findings of Patricia Gomez, the independent investigator assigned to evaluate me. The clerk opened the sealed report and began reading the summary into the record. The investigator conducted a 90-minute in-person evaluation at the respondent's residence. The respondent demonstrated full cognitive capacity, including clear articulation of financial responsibilities, consistent employment history, organized living conditions, and no clinical indicators of impaired judgment or executive dysfunction. Across the aisle, Anders uncrossed his legs. Crossed them again. The investigator further notes that the petitioner's characterization of the respondent as socially isolated and incapable of maintaining relationships is inconsistent with her stable 11-year employment record, structured home environment, and articulate self-presentation. Keating stopped writing. His Mont Blanc hovered above his legal pad. "And finally," the clerk continued, "the psychological evaluation submitted by the petitioners was authored by Dr. Leonard Bishop, who has no documented record of directly examining the respondent. The evaluation appears to have been based solely on information provided by family members. raising significant ethical and evidentiary concerns. The room shifted. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but the air changed. Judge Castillo lifted his eyes slowly from the report. He looked at Keating, then at Anders, then back at the document. "Counselor Keating," he said evenly, "were you aware that Dr. Bishop did not conduct a direct clinical evaluation of the respondent?" Keating opened his mouth, closed it. "Your Honor, Dr. Bishop is a licensed—" "That was not my question." The judge's tone was calm, precise. "Were you aware that no examination occurred?" Keating hesitated. "I was under the impression that an evaluation had been completed." "We will return to that," the judge said, making a note. "Ms. Whitmore, proceed." Eva's handkerchief had stopped moving. Aunt Carol's fingers were gripping each other tightly, and for the first time that morning, Anders's fingers were no longer tapping the table. The momentum had shifted. Claire allowed the silence to settle before speaking again. "Your Honor, we would now like to submit the respondent's court-ordered asset disclosure, prepared in full compliance with the court's directive and verified by independent appraisal where required. Additionally, we are attaching a supplemental exhibit directly relevant to the underlying motivation behind this petition." She handed the clear folder to the bailiff. The same folder that had been resting on our table since 8:45 a.m. Yellow tabs, 40 pages. The bailiff carried it to the bench. Judge Castillo accepted it without expression and began turning the pages. He paused, flipped back, read again. Across the aisle, Keating leaned toward Anders and whispered something. Anders shook his head dismissively, lips barely moving. "She doesn't have anything." Claire rose again. "Your Honor, we respectfully request that the court have the asset inventory read into the record, as is customary in contested guardianship proceedings." Judge Castillo gave a short nod. "Proceed." The bailiff, a man in his 50s with a steady baritone that made every sentence sound final, opened the folder to the first yellow tab. I looked at my father one last time before it began. He was leaning back in his chair, legs crossed, one hand resting casually on the table. Composed. Certain. Still certain. In his mind, this was procedural. A routine financial summary of a 34-year-old woman who lived in a studio apartment and drove an older Toyota Corolla. He was about to learn how incomplete that picture was. The bailiff cleared his throat. "But before I tell you what he read, I need to take you to the night before the hearing, 9:43 p.m. My phone rang. Not Anders, not Eva. A number from Austin. Noah?" His voice was low, controlled, the way he sounds when he's trying to steady himself. "I know about tomorrow," he said. "I bought a bus ticket. I'll be there by 8. "You don't have to do that." "Yeah, I do." I could hear the dorm hallway behind him, music through a wall, laughter somewhere distant. "Helena, I overheard Dad last week. He was in the garage with the door half open. Thought he was alone." My chest tightened. He said, these are his words, "She's probably got 30 or 40 grand saved. That'll cover a few months. Once the guardianship goes through, I sell her car, deal with the lease, restructure everything." Noah's voice sharpened. "He didn't use your name." He said, "the girl." And then he told his lawyer, "Just get me the signature. She won't fight it. She doesn't have it in her." I pressed my palm flat against the kitchen table. "And there's more," Noah said. "I recorded it. The whole thing. 18 minutes. I went still. "I checked," he continued quickly. "Texas is a one-party consent state. I was present. It's legal." For the first time in months, the pressure in my chest shifted. I wasn't alone. "You've been protecting me since I was 7, he said. I'm 21 now. It's my turn. 6:15 a.m., the morning of the hearing. Gray light filtered through the bathroom window. I stood in front of the mirror, buttoning my shirt. No speech, no dramatic moment, just a woman getting dressed for the most important day of her adult life. My phone buzzed. Claire. "Order of operations," she said immediately. "All business. First, Patricia Gomez's report. Establish competence. Undermine the psychological evaluation. Second, the asset inventory. Demonstrate long-term financial independence. Third," she paused, "the forensic audit. Identity theft. Forged HELOC. Fraudulent credit cards. That's what they're not expecting." Well, that's what no one's expecting. "When that hits the record," she continued, "you do one thing. Stay seated, stay silent. Let the documents speak." I almost smiled. I've been letting documents speak my entire career. A brief pause. I could hear the hint of approval in her voice. "Fair enough. One more thing. Your brother is on a bus. If we need him, the recording supports motive. A father seeking control of his daughter's finances to cover his own debts is not concern. It's exploitation." Understood. "See you at 8:30. I finished dressing, slid the 40-page folder into my bag next to a bottle of water. At the intersection of Lincoln and Fifth, I stopped at a red light. I glanced at the passenger seat, the folder, the water bottle. 11 years of preparation contained in a $2 plastic binder. The light turned green. Back in the courtroom, the bailiff opened the folder. "Asset item 1, he began, voice even and unhurried. "Vanguard Total Stock Market Index Fund and associated brokerage accounts, held solely in the name of Helena Marie Lind. Verify balance as of October 31st. $1,248,300. There was no gasp. This wasn't a movie. What filled the room instead was something heavier. Silence with weight. Keating's pen touched his legal pad, but didn't move. Eva's handkerchief slipped from her fingers into her lap. Anders leaned forward slowly, as if he had misheard and was waiting for correction. Judge Castillo looked down at the page, then at me, then at Anders, then back at the page. His posture shifted almost imperceptibly. The subtle straightening of a judge realizing the case before him is not the case he was presented with. Anders turned to Keating. He didn't whisper. He never learned how. "That's not right," he said sharply. "There's a mistake. Where would she... She works in records. Check the number. That can't be correct." Keating did not check the number. He stared at the document in the judge's hand. For the first time that morning, his Mont Blanc pen was capped. Beside me, Claire remained perfectly still. I remained perfectly still. We had agreed. No reaction. Let the numbers speak. The bailiff glanced at the bench. Judge Castillo gave a small nod. "Continue." "Asset item 2. The bailiff turned the page. 3 residential rental properties held solely in the name of Helena Marie Lind." He read each one carefully. Addresses, purchase dates, appraised values, each verified by an independent assessor. A 2-bedroom residence in Irving, Texas, acquired at tax lien auction 11 years ago for $23,000. Current appraised value, $185,000. Anders didn't move. A 3-bedroom property in Garland, Texas, purchased 5 years ago for $61,000. Current appraised value, $340,000. Keating's jaw tightened. A duplex in Arlington, Texas, purchased 3 years ago for $92,000. Current appraised value, $365,000. The bailiff paused briefly before continuing. Total appraised real estate value, $975,000. Combined annual rental income, $54,000. Keating slowly closed his laptop. He placed both hands flat on the table. He wasn't looking at Anders. He wasn't looking at anyone. He was calculating. Not financial math, professional math. How deep the hole was, whether it was survivable. Anders' face shifted into something I had never seen before. Not anger, not control, something closer to vertigo. His daughter. The one he had described as incompetent, the one living in a box, owned 3 properties. He had lost his house. I owned 3. Eva wasn't crying anymore. She was staring at the back of Anders' head with a look I recognized instantly. Recalculation. When the script collapses, she writes a new one. In the gallery, Aunt Carol sat perfectly still, hands flat on her thighs. Michael Turner was staring at the exit. Judge Castillo spoke quietly. Continue. The bailiff turned to the 3rd tab. Asset item 3, supplemental document. Independent forensic audit report prepared by Hargrove and Dunn, certified public accountants. His voice remained even. It didn't need emphasis. Findings. Between January of the prior year and September of the current year, Anders Lind and Eva Lind executed unauthorized financial transactions totaling $389,420 using the personal identifying information of Helena Marie Lind. He continued. Transactions include 2 credit card accounts opened through identity fraud. Combined balance, $42,700. 1 home equity line of credit in the amount of $140,000, obtained using a revoked power of attorney and bearing a forged signature. Additional unauthorized withdrawals, balance transfers, and associated fees totaling $206,720. Judge Castillo raised his hand. Stop. The bailiff fell silent. The judge stared at the page for several seconds. Then he removed his glasses slowly and placed them on the bench. He looked at Anders, at Eva, at Daniel Keating, whose face had gone pale. Security, Judge Castillo said calmly. In here. Not shouted. Worse. Controlled. 2 officers entered through the side door and positioned themselves near the exit. Anders shot to his feet, chair scraping loudly against the floor. That's a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I am her father. Mr. Lind, the judge said evenly. Sit down. Anders sat. His hands were shaking now, the same hands that had tapped in confidence minutes earlier. Eva's face had drained of color. The handkerchief lay forgotten at her feet. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I let the documents do what documents do best. They told the truth. The courtroom door opened again, this time not security, Noah. He wore a UT Austin hoodie and jeans, backpack slung over one shoulder. A 21-year-old who had ridden a bus through the night to get here. Because he had. His eyes found mine. I gave the smallest nod I could without breaking. Claire stood. Your Honor, we have one additional witness. Noah Lind, age 21, son of the petitioners. Anders twisted in his chair. Noah, what are you... He stopped himself, glanced at the judge, lowered his voice. What are you doing here? Noah didn't answer him. He walked to the witness stand, took his seat, and faced Judge Castillo directly. Your Honor, he began, steady despite the exhaustion in his face. 1 week ago, I overheard my father speaking by phone with his attorney from the garage of our family home. I was in the adjacent kitchen. He did not know I was present. He pulled a folded sheet of paper from his pocket, a printed transcript. My father stated, and I am quoting, She's probably got 30 or 40 grand saved. That'll cover a few months. Once the guardianship goes through, I sell her car, deal with the lease, and restructure." The room was silent. He referred to my sister as the girl. He also said, "Just get me the signature. She won't fight it. She doesn't have it in her." For the first time, Noah looked at Anders. "Dad didn't file this petition because he's worried about Helena," he said clearly. "He filed it because he's broke, and he thought she was an easy target." Anders lunged forward in his chair. "Noah, you're betraying your family." The gavel cracked against the bench. "Mr. Lind," Judge Castillo said sharply, "one more word and I will hold you in contempt. Do you understand?" Anders's mouth opened, closed. He sank back into his seat, hands gripping the armrests. The polished watch on his wrist caught the fluorescent light one last time. On the stand, Noah turned toward me. His eyes were glassy, but his voice did not waver. "I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner, Helena." I pressed my lips together. I couldn't speak. But I held his gaze, and I hoped he understood there was nothing to forgive. Judge Castillo removed his glasses again, placing them carefully on the bench. The courtroom was completely still. Security at the doors, Anders frozen in his chair, Eva motionless. Daniel Keating, with his laptop shut, staring at a spot on the table like he wished he could disappear into it. "The court has heard sufficient evidence to rule," Judge Castillo began, each word deliberate. "First, the petition for guardianship over Helena Marie Lind is denied. There is no credible evidence, none, that the respondent lacks capacity for self-care or financial management." He paused. "On the contrary, the evidence presented demonstrates a level of financial discipline and competence that many adults, including this court, would consider exceptional." The words settled over the room. "Second, the psychological evaluation submitted by the petitioners, authored by Dr. Leonard Bishop, was prepared without direct examination of the respondent. This court considers that document, at best, grossly negligent, and at worst, a deliberate attempt to mislead. The matter will be referred to the Texas Medical Board for review." Anders' jaw tightened. "Third," the judge continued, leaning forward slightly, "the forensic audit attached to the respondent's disclosure establishes prima facie evidence of identity theft, financial fraud, and misuse of a revoked power of attorney to obtain credit in another person's name. These are not civil matters." He looked directly at my parents. "They are criminal matters." He turned to the clerk. "I am ordering the full record of these proceedings, along with the forensic audit and supporting documentation, to be transmitted to the Dallas County District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation." Then back to them. "Mr. and Mrs. Lind, you are not to leave this county until further notice. Do you understand?" Anders did not respond. Eva gave the faintest nod. The gavel came down. "This hearing is concluded." The sound echoed against the wood-paneled walls and humming lights. Indifferent, mechanical, continuing as systems always do. Anders stared at his polished shoes. The courtroom he had entered expecting to control had just turned into something else entirely. I had imagined this moment for years. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 11 years. Outside Department 7, the hallway's granite floors amplified every step. Claire walked on my left, Noah a few paces behind. "Helena," Anders' voice. He was coming toward us quickly, suit jacket undone now, tie loosened, composure unraveling. Keating had already peeled off toward the elevators. "You need to stop this," Anders said. "The referral to the DA. Tell your lawyer to withdraw it. I am your father." A security officer stepped closer. Claire positioned herself slightly in front of me. "Mr. Lind, my client is under no obligation to speak with you. I strongly suggest you maintain distance." He ignored her. His eyes were on me. Not commanding, not furious. Desperate. It was the first time in my life I had seen Anders Lind look desperate. It didn't feel satisfying. It felt exhausting. He turned to Noah. "Son, you don't understand. They manipulated you. Your sister—" "Stop," Noah said quietly. "No one manipulated me. You did this." Eva reached for my arm. Her fingers brushed my sleeve, cold, shaking. "Helena, please. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I stopped, turned to face her, and said the simplest truth I had. "Mom, your apology doesn't erase $389,420 in unauthorized transactions in my name. You need a lawyer now, not me." I turned back toward the glass doors, granite under my shoes. Claire beside me, Noah behind me. Sunlight pouring through the exit like something opening. I didn't look back. There was nothing behind me I needed anymore. The system moved slowly at first, then all at once. 2 weeks later, the Dallas County District Attorney formally opened an investigation. Anders was charged with 3 felony counts: identity theft, financial fraud, and filing fraudulent documents with the court. Eva was charged as an accessory. Dr. Leonard Bishop received notice from the Texas Medical Board that his license was under review for issuing a clinical evaluation without examination. His practice website went offline the following month. Daniel Keating did not face criminal charges, but the state bar initiated an ethics inquiry into whether he had exercised proper due diligence. Claire told me that kind of inquiry rarely ended careers, but it followed them. Anders' contractor license, already suspended during bankruptcy proceedings, was permanently revoked once felony charges were filed. Even if he prevailed criminally, the licensing board had its own standards. A fraud indictment exceeded them. The HELOC was closed, the credit cards canceled, the forged applications invalidated, every unauthorized charge reversed. My credit report was corrected line by line, like scrubbing graffiti off a wall someone else had vandalized. The total stolen $389,420. Every dollar was documented. Every dollar was ordered returned. People later asked if I pushed for the maximum penalty. I didn't. I didn't ask for punitive damages. I didn't seek interviews. I didn't want headlines. I asked for 2 things: the return of what was taken, and the removal of every fraudulent mark from my financial record. That was enough. I didn't need revenge. I needed my name back. Clean, intact, and mine. The week the district attorney filed charges, Claire secured a restraining order. No hearing. Judge Castillo reviewed the record and signed it the same day. 500 feet. No direct contact. No indirect contact. No messages through anyone else. A clear line in legal language. I changed the locks. Changed my number. Placed a credit freeze with all 3 bureaus. No one ever opens anything in my name again without my verified, in-person authorization. The following Monday at 7:58 a.m., I walked back into the Dallas County Clerk's office. Same desk, same chipped mug, same fluorescent lights. Susan Caldwell was already there. Instead of her usual nod, she placed a small espresso on my desk. "I read about the hearing," she said. She didn't ask for details. After a war, what you offer someone is normal. "Are you all right?" "For the first time in a long time," I said. She nodded and went back to work. So did I. Property transfers, tax liens, trust filings. The county kept moving. A restraining order isn't punishment. It's a boundary. It says, this is the line. You put yourself on the other side of it. I didn't draw that line out of hatred. I drew it because I finally understood something simple. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's access. The Saturday after the hearing, Noah came to see my apartment for the first time. He stood in the doorway of my 450-square-foot studio, backpack over one shoulder, staring around like he'd miscalculated reality. You live here? You own 3 properties. The rent's reasonable, I said. He laughed, a real laugh, not the careful one he used growing up under Anders. He sat on the floor because there was only one chair. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I should have said something sooner. That wasn't your fight. I made it my fight. And that, I told him, was brave. We ordered pizza, ate on the floor, paper plates, tap water, window open, evening traffic drifting in. Helena? Yeah? Will you teach me about investing? I looked at him, 21, exhausted, determined. Step 1, open a Vanguard account. Step 2, never tell Dad. He grinned. So did I, and for the first time in years, the studio didn't feel small. It felt right. 6 months later, Anders accepted a plea deal. 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, full restitution of $389,420 in structured payments. Eva received probation with cooperation credit. Neither went to prison. The system handled them the way it handles first-time nonviolent offenders, firmly, without spectacle. The Plano house was foreclosed and auctioned. They moved 30 miles away into a 1-bedroom apartment. I know because Noah mentioned it once, then changed the subject. We don't speak. Not because of the restraining order. That's just the legal boundary. The real boundary was built over 34 years of being told I wasn't enough. At work, I was promoted. Senior records analyst. A small raise. A new nameplate. I placed it beside the framed receipt for my final student loan payment. 2 documents. One marking the end of debt. One marking the beginning of being seen. I still live in the studio, but now I'm looking at houses, not as investments. For me. A kitchen big enough to cook real meals. A yard where I can sit in the sun and owe no one an explanation. Someone asked if I've forgiven my parents. I thought about it. Forgiveness is my choice, I said. Consequences belong to the court. Boundaries belong to both of us. So that's my story. I'm Helena Lind. If there's one thing I want you to take from my story, it's this. Strength doesn't always look loud. It doesn't always look like confrontation or revenge or walking into a room and taking control. Sometimes strength looks like quiet discipline, like paying your bills on time, like learning the fine print, like building something slowly, brick by brick, while no one is watching. For years, I thought surviving was enough. I thought staying small kept the peace. I thought love meant enduring whatever was handed to me. I was wrong. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's permission. And the moment I understood that, everything changed. Drawing a line doesn't make you cruel. Protecting your name doesn't make you selfish. Refusing to be used doesn't make you ungrateful. It makes you responsible for your own life. I didn't win because I destroyed someone else. I won because I refused to abandon myself. So if you're listening to this and you feel underestimated, dismissed, or quietly controlled, start where you are. Learn, save, document, protect, build. You don't need to be loud to be powerful. And when the time comes to draw your line, draw it without apology. If this story spoke to you, like this video,